Washington Journal continues.
And we're back with Karen Bass, Democrat of California, serves on the Budget Committee as well. Congresswoman, let's begin with this vote today. It's expected today on whether or not to extend the payroll tax into 2012. It also includes an extension of unemployment benefits, language to approve that Keystone pipeline. Where do you stand on it?
I can't imagine voting on it at all. And I think that it's so unfortunate because it's very straightforward to extend unemployment insurance. And, you know, I was listening to one of the previous callers talking and explaining her situation. And, you know, it's just not good enough to say that we want to do fast forward a pipeline that, yes, will bring jobs, but that woman needed immediate relief. And so, to me, it should be a clean, extend unemployment, and extend the payroll tax holiday. It should be clean. It should not be filled with a whole bunch of policy riders, some of which your last guest talked about.
Well, what is your view of the Keystone Pipeline?
Well, I think that the president's decision to hold it off for more extensive review is where we should stand. To me, it's a false issue to add that in. You know, if you look at the bill that's going to come before the House today, it has a number of provisions attached to it. It's almost like, you know, earmarks are banned for appropriations for money, but what we have in this bill are policy earmarks in order to get Republican votes. So why on earth would you tell someone who needs unemployment that they need to have a drug test first? Why would you tell someone who needs the immediate relief of an unemployment check that they need to enroll in a GED program? Those are all fine things to do, but why would you hold someone's unemployment check hostage to policies like that?
We'll talk a little bit more about that, but first I want to show you and our viewers the leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, a Republican of Kentucky, came to the floor yesterday and talked about this debate and the issue of jobs. Here's what he had to say.
So far, the only reason Democrats are given for opposing this bill is that they'd rather extend the payroll tax cut on its own without adding language about a pipeline that many of them say they support anyway. So evidently, they'd vote for both of these things separately, but not together. That makes absolutely no sense. Look, you're either for this pipeline project and the jobs that would come with it, or you're not. And if you're for it, there's no reason to oppose it just because it's not offered as a standalone measure.
Congresswoman, are you for the jobs that would come out of this Keystone Pipeline?
What I believe is that it needs to be more extensive environmental review. And so, sure, I'm for the jobs, but what the president had decided was not to do the pipeline, but to have it go through more review, which is why it was delayed. There is no relationship, in my mind, between extending unemployment insurance and extending the payroll tax cut. To add a number of policy issues onto that to get Republican votes makes the issue very confusing, and I think it's an inappropriate thing to do when people need immediate relief. This is the holidays, for God's sake. Why would we add in things like this?
On the issue of unemployment insurance and Republican efforts to reform them, here's the Washington Times. In 2010, when unemployment insurance benefits peaked at $156 billion, the program overpaid some $16.5 billion for an error rate of 10.6%. In 2011, that error rate was 11.4%, overpaid by $13 billion. So why not reform it?
Well, the way maybe it should be reformed, but the way the Republicans are talking about reforming it, I don't know if it's really a reform to say we're going to reduce the number of weeks that someone should be eligible for unemployment. And so reducing it almost by half, I don't think that's a reform. If there have been overpayments, if there have been mistakes, then maybe we need to tighten up the accountability. But I wouldn't call reducing and almost cutting in half the weeks that an individual would be eligible for unemployment. What kind of reform is that?
Let's get to phone calls. Bud is a Republican in Bloomington, Illinois. You're on the air first for Karen Bass. Go ahead.
Hi, Karen.
Hi, Bud.
I don't know if you read Martin Wolf at the Financial Times, but he found a direct correlation between balance of payments deficits, which is basically a trade deficit, and weak economies. And basically, if you think of the economy as a circulatory system, it needs money to get to all of its parts to be healthy. And our problem is we don't have enough money getting to all of the parts. And the reason we don't is because we're bleeding money, and that's reflected in our trade deficit. Why aren't you folks addressing that trade deficit?
Well, I think, the idea that we're going to vote today on the unemployment insurance and extending unemployment puts money directly into the economy, and that's something that we need to do. So if people have money to buy food, if they have money to pay their bills, you are talking about an immediate boost in the economy, and that's what we should be doing right now.
On the issue of extending the payroll tax, Bruce Bartlett wrote back in August for his blog for the New York Times about why the case against the payroll tax cut holiday. He said this: first, the tax cut only helps those with jobs. While many have low wages and undoubtedly are spending all their additional cash flow, those with the greatest need and most likely to spend any additional income are the unemployed. Second, the payroll tax cut helps many workers who have no need for it and will only pocket the tax savings. Third, economic theory and the experience with tax rebates in 2001 and 2008 tells that people are strongly inclined to save temporary increases in income. People only increase their spending when they perceive an increase in their permanent income.
Well, first of all, I think you've given an argument for why we need to extend the unemployment insurance benefits for people. You're right. I mean, obviously, the payroll tax benefit helps those who are working, which is why we need to do both. Why we need to do both before we break for the holidays this year.
But what about his argument that economic theory shows that people don't spend a tax cut when they think it's temporary, only when it's permanent?
Well, I think that, first of all, economists say different things, because there are economists that also say that if we extend the payroll tax benefit, that it will lead to an increase in jobs. And if we don't extend it, we will lose additional jobs. So I do think that there's different economic theories.
How does it go, if this is extended for another year, when and how does it go back up to 6.2%? Should it be gradual?
Well, it could be gradual, and that would be something that would have to be decided at the end of next year. And, one of the things that I do think that we need to look at, but I don't think we need to look at when we're facing a deadline like this, is overall tax reform. At the end of next year, we're certainly going to be faced with the decision to let the Bush tax cuts expire. But I think that it might be an opportunity in 2012 for us to take a step back, to take time, to not do it based on a deadline, and to look at overall tax reform. There's a number of things that need to be done. We certainly need to look at all of the loopholes that we have to see how we can raise the revenue to deal with the deficit.
Joe's next. He's a Democrat in Amsterdam, New York.
Hi, Joe.
Hi. Thanks for C-SPAN. I just wanted to ask, didn't the Republicans in their Pledge to America promise to pass clean bills and not put Christmas tree ornaments like the XL pipeline onto the riders on their bills?
Well, I mean, that's exactly why I described it as earmarks. It might not be earmarks in terms of cash for specific projects, but it's earmarks in terms of policy issues that obviously individual Republicans needed in order to get their votes. And so this bill that we're going to be voted on today looks absolutely like a Christmas tree with all of the ornaments. And to have an ornament at Christmas time that says if you are going to get your unemployment check, you need to be tested for drugs first is really an example of